Welcome, everyone. We are the Decatur Clean Energy Project. Hopefully you're tuning in either at the recording or sometime in the past as using this Decatur 202. This is our first Decatur 202. And the concept here is that we are tapping into the expertise. There's a very deep expertise in Decatur around clean energy. And we're going to tap into as many members of the Decatur community that are in the industry or have other expertise to sort of give us a little higher level education around various topics. And we're going to be recording these, playing these at other times, and taking your questions. And so if you're looking at this at some point in the past, we appreciate you coming in and learning about this. Please look for the other topic areas as they come along, and ultimately look for the charrette that's going to be occurring in March of next year, in which the plan will all be coming together for the Clean Energy Plan for Decatur. Tonight we have Mike Barsick. He is a Decatur resident and Southface employee, and who has been in the weatherization and clean energy space for his entire career. And we ultimately are going to be talking today about some of the projects of the King Day service projects that use weatherization to help build equity in the community. And we're going to let Mike kick it off and hope that you enjoy this Decatur 202 for the Clean Energy Plan.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks everybody for being here. And Robert, I just want to comment, I can't wait to see someone go back in time to watch this, because you referred to them going back into the past. So I'm excited for time travel, I really am. But for today, thank you very much for the chance to be here. I'm Mike Barsick, and I've been with Southface for over 26 years. I serve as the technical principal, but I've also been volunteering with this wonderful effort, the MLK Service Project. I've been doing it ever since it started. And I believe this was the 20th year that we actually did something. And I really can't speak to the larger sense of how it was organized. I know that at some point they spun it off, and I did look at their website a little bit. I know I always volunteered and worked, but the bigger parts and pieces, you can learn more at mlkserviceproject.com. At some point it spun off and became its own 501c3. And the idea was to take advantage of this opportunity of Martin Luther King Day and actually give something back. It's some people see it as a day off, and a lot of us, I think, see it as a day of service. And it originally started off, I believe it was just a half day. That's in the upper picture is a friend of mine. That's me, and that was one of our early recipients. And that's Frank Burdett. And Frank also is a former Southfacer, and he and I have led most of the weatherization effort that we've done throughout the MLK project. And it is happening in the year 2022, which is exciting. It didn't officially happen in the year 2021, but we actually did a big effort. And if we have time, I'll show you pictures of what we did. So it started as a half-day effort. And like I said, now at some point they became a separate nonprofit, or they're spun off as a nonprofit. But it's just a great effort with lots of great touches and tick the boxes on so many wonderful things of helping elderly folks stay in their home, making them more comfortable, making their homes safer, certainly making them more comfortable and obviously more efficient and less expensive to live in. So a lot of great values come out of this effort. The root of all good weatherization programs are wrapped around building science. And so this is where we're going to really take a very holistic look at the house and understand the physics of heat, air, and moisture flow, but appreciate that we're trying to do a good job on, and I kind of highlight some of the key issues that you'll see pop up again, where we're going to really try to make the building thermal envelope, really be good. And a lot of older homes, it's not so good. And I say that because I live in a 100-year-old home that when we bought it, at least, it was not so good. So we're going to focus a lot on air sealing and on insulation details. We're going to look particularly at mechanical systems, heating and cooling, and particularly ductwork. That's a huge area of opportunity, particularly on existing homes. We're going to talk about fresh air, and we do a little bit on that as well. We also dabble a little bit in hot water, particularly distribution issues and things like hot water pipe insulation, as well as lighting. And we don't mess much with appliances, but we try to really make sure that whatever we're doing, we're taking a holistic approach, and we don't want to do anything that would improve more efficient, but would actually potentially endanger the homeowners. And if you go into stuff willy-nilly and don't know what you're doing, that could happen. So it's very important that we take, we kind of use the science, so to speak, and make good decisions. And I thought I'd kind of break it up into sort of basically, here's what we do as typically what we're doing kind of behind the scenes or up front before the actual event. And then I thought I'd give you some examples of the types of work that we do. And I just tried to throw a lot of pictures from a lot of different years of MLK projects. So usually what has happened in the past, the head honcho is Paul Mitchell, just an amazing person who is still involved, but I believe he stepped down as the leader. And he would kind of give us a short list of potential houses that he vetted and felt like were decent candidates. And we learned the importance of not trying to stretch ourselves too thin, but also try to do more than one house and really hit that hard. So we typically are doing 1 to 3 houses, I guess I would say is probably what we're typically pulling down. What we're looking for is that there's nothing that's really dramatically bad, like a major roof leak or things like that. We're looking for a house that's probably going to still be there. If we put all this effort into weatherization and it turns around and gets sold and torn down a year later, that's not so good. So we want to make sure the home will, the occupants will be there. We really like multi-generational situations where there's maybe a grandparent and other relatives, just more people to benefit. But those are considerations when we have lots of good candidates. So we try to pick homes that we think we can do the most good with, and essentially hit the targets that we're going after. We have a lot of experience with how to assess a home and know what volunteers can and can't do well. And so we really try to come up with a scope of work, SOW, that is going to be meaningful, but also have sort of volunteer-friendly upgrades that they can do. We also, there's more pre-tests we could do, but we're volunteering our effort, and it's usually during the holidays. So we're generally working hard to just get a pre-blower door in. And that's a test that helps measure how leaky the building is to begin with. And then we do our improvements, and a lot of times, or usually we come back and test at final and see what the relative improvements were. I'll talk about that at the very end. And then we develop a scope of work. So this was the one that we did for 2020. So that would be last year. And that was the last one before the pandemic hit. And we are always looking for health and safety concerns. That's kind of the highest priority. And then obviously looking for upgrades and things that are not going to get in the way of other work that's being done, because a lot of times there's painting going on. There might be yard maintenance. There might be plumbing repair. So other things that are happening that are important. And then we try to make sure we've got a budget to handle that, as well as assemble the tools. Generally, the MLK project provides tools from the Atlanta Tool Bank. And of course, we bring our tools and stuff, but materials are important. And it's generally a fairly, I would say it's a good use of funds, because most of the air sealing we use are relatively inexpensive. We use a lot of caulk and foam and mastic and foam board and gasketing and things like that. We use fasteners, we use insulation and so on. So the insulation at the end might be the most expensive single item if we end up blowing a lot of insulation in the attic. So I put this list together. Here are typical, I would say, good examples of kind of scope of work. And I pulled these from years past. There are certainly other things that we've done on here, but these are probably some of the more typical ones. And when we get in a crawl space, we offer people sometimes the opportunity to wear Tyvek suits. And this particular crawl space was on Feld Avenue. And I remember the access was pretty small, so only skinny people could go in. So fortunately, I was not allowed to enter, so that was great. We we tend to do most of our work, I would say, probably up in an attic. So sometimes that presents issues if the house has old, what's called knob and tube wiring. We have to coordinate with the electrician because that wiring is very dangerous and it has to be remediated, essentially removed and rewired before we can do really anything in the attic. Sometimes we've tried to work around the electrician. It's fun. And I'll go through one by one. So a lot of the work, and this is very high bang for the buck effort, is with air sealing. So we're going to air seal walls, floors, ceilings, fireplaces, anything that we can air seal, that because these houses can be just unbelievably leaky, and air sealing is just, again, very good bang for the buck. So here's examples of holes that we've patched and walls and ceilings. This is called an attic bypass or a chase. It's a great example of how air in an attic can leak down and completely get inside the interior wall cavities and cause all kinds of comfort issues as well as energy loss and so on. And then capping the chase. And this particular house did not have any insulation in it. So in some ways it makes our job easier, but typically there might be some insulation and we have to move it aside to find these holes. Here's an example of sealing those. Here's some other types of holes that we might find in say a crawl space where they're plumbing. That's before it's been fixed, but that'll be correct. That's also a pathway for critters to get in, and there are health issues with that, moldy crawl space there, et cetera. There's a lot of other benefits besides just energy and comfort that fall out of the work we do. These homeowners had a fireplace that never got used, and it's a giant hole. And so we would come up with I won't say a permanent seal, but it's a more permanent seal that could certainly be undone if it ever needed to be done. But usually we can seal that up. And then another big thing we do, as I said, we spend a lot of time up in the attic trying to do air sealing and get it ready for blown insulation. And so one big thing is we want to keep attic ventilation functioning, and we don't want blown insulation to clog up the vents on the eave. So we'll build these baffles out of foam board, and it requires some creative jockeying to get them into place. We'll sometimes build an elevated raised platform for storage or way. I've got more pictures of that if we need to at the end, but here we are building that, and we'll usually pre-insulate that with batting. And then when it's all done, this is kind of a picture of what it looks like after we've blown insulation. So that's just an example of that. Another big project we always take is we hit ductwork. We pull all the registers, be they in the floor, the ceiling, or the walls. We shop vac as far in as we can go, clean them out, and then we reach in with mastic and start sealing and working our way out. And or we get in and seal if they're accessible. We might seal them, further down the run if you can, with this very friendly material called mastic. It's a little messy, but it's a great material to do sealing of ductwork. It's very durable, and we love it. Other projects we do, a number of houses we find have issues with how the clothes dryer has been ducted or poorly ducted or not ducted. So that turns out to be something we do. If it is there, a lot of times we'll try to clean it and reconnect it, make sure the flapper damper is proper, and make it have a good airflow, and that can help reduce the risk of a fire. If the house has a crawl space, it generally doesn't have plastic on the ground, so we'll put a plastic vapor barrier. A lot of times we'll glue that to the exterior wall, or the foundation wall rather. So lots and lots of details, lots of crawling around. A lot of times the house has a whole house fan, so we'll make a whole house fan cover that is insulated and it looks nice, and we'll put the cover on that. We'll try to label the switch, make sure people know you have to take the cover off before you use it. If they never use the whole house fan, we might even remove it, but a lot of people say they want to keep it. And then there's an attic access, getting up and down into the access. We'll make sort of almost like a pizza that's insulation stacked up, and then it fits on a gasketed seal. So that's nice and airtight and very well insulated. We fix exterior drainage problem. This is something that we've started doing in more recent years. And it's a huge issue from a building durability standpoint. If I have time, I'll show you a case study of what we did on this particular house. We had Boy Scouts. I said, don't dig a ditch, dig a swale. And they dug a ditch, but we filled it back in. And A swale is a very narrow channel to let the water divert away from the foundation. And it really helps. We also get into easy things like LED lighting replacement. That's an easy one, but we also fix light fixtures and clean ceiling fan blades and try to get appliances that are there functioning if they, or tuned up if they need it. And then somewhere towards the end, we blow in attic insulation. This sometimes happens after the event. And, we have a punch list of what didn't get done, and a very small couple of us come back and knock it out. But last year we were, in 2020, we were very successful, got it all done on time, including blowing the attic with insulation. So sometimes we'll, this is another former South Face that has a company that does this. Sometimes we'll hire him or his company to come blow it, or sometimes he'll let us borrow his machine and we'll do it. And a few other things like we'll insulate hot water pipes. And if somebody has a window unit AC that stays in place year round, we'll insulate the sides, we'll cover it with a plastic, and we'll tell them how to cut that plastic. Basically, it's if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you just cut the plastic, like, let's say here on this side, and then across the top, and then down on the other side, it'll fall down when you want to use it. And then next winter, you can just flap it back up and tape the seams. So some people want to keep their window units, and that's a good way to make it not be a liability in the, and as well as seal at the window joint. So that was just some examples of stuff that we've done. And also another big safety one is we try to address or assess the combustion safety because we don't want to do any air sealing or duct sealing or anything to change what the pressure in the house if we haven't corrected combustion safety issues. Here's a house that had a disconnected flue pipe that we discovered. So if it's something we're comfortable fixing, we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll tag it. We've certainly found gas leaks, and we've had professionals come in and seal those. Either we'll do it or somebody will do it as part of the work. And this particular one had a water heater that was in a closet, a very small closet right next to the clothes dryer. When the clothes dryer ran, it created negative pressure. And if this tried to fire, it could backdraft. And backdrafting can produce carbon monoxide, and that is certainly not healthy. So we built an isolated, what we call combustion closet. We brought in combustion air for the water heater that was not from the house. It's just an example of a house as a system approach, some of the kind of work that we might do. So my very last example, I just thought I'd show the results from this most current year was the pre-blower door was 3,100. That's actually probably one of the tightest houses we've ever sort of showed up to and found. We still managed to reduce it 20%. More typically, it's probably in the 30 to 50% reduction range. I don't know if there is typical, but I did find a number from 2014. We had 8,000 CFM pre-test, and we knocked it by 2/3, which is a pretty impressive reduction. So that is kind of a quick overview of all the stuff. These are some training pictures, talk about how to build an elevated platform. And again, this is something we can do so that once we blow insulation, you still have a means to get from one end to the other. And I think that's probably the big thing. How am I doing on time? I have one more thing I could show if we wanted to see it. I'm not hearing anything.
I think we're probably about 15 minutes in. So if you have like a couple last minute, additions.
Okay. I've learned to start taking pictures, and I thought I'd show, this was kind of neat because the homeowner clearly had some issues with the home. Let me see if I can get this thing to launch. This was the same home that we did the weatherization effort on in 2020. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't do we didn't want to go in the house of an elderly person. No one had been vaccinated in January of 2021. So we did an outdoor project. This home that we weatherized was doing great from an energy standpoint, but it still had this moisture problem. It's a little hard to tell from the picture, but the grade in the back would slope into the foundation. And you can tell that this block basement wall was getting wet and wicking lots of water up into the house. It had drainage issues. That's on the inside. You can see water collecting, liquid water wicking up. that mat was soaking wet. The boxes were soaking wet. Mold is growing, mildew is growing. So a clear moisture problem and a drainage issue. So for 2021, that was the work that was done in 2020. And that was the side swale here. But for 2021, we wanted to go after this. So we had a group of about, I think maybe a dozen, 15 folks. And in a half day's effort, we moved, I think, about 60 wheelbarrow loads and backfilled dirt to basically create a positive slope against the side of the backside of the house. So we also fixed the drainage. We built a little retaining wall here. We fixed drainage on the sides and on the front. And at the end of the day, let me see if I can cut to the chase here. So this is all work in progress. There you can kind of get there. We're kind of getting to the tail end of it. So now when the water comes off the roof or when it rains hard, instead of funneling back into the basement, it all drains away. And then once we get it far enough away from the house, the slope does take it away. And the cool story on this is that the homeowner, that's Frank, my colleague, he spoke to the homeowner, I don't know, a few months later or some point down the road. And he said, "How's it going?" And she goes, "Oh, it's the best ever. My basement has never been this dry." So it's nice to know that what we did actually made a difference, and it managed to keep her comfortable, and also obviously improvement from a durability standpoint. So that's it in a nutshell. That's great examples of the type of work that we can do for so many citizens in Decatur and have a huge impact both on their utility bills, but also on their health, their comfort, and their ability to stay in their home. Thank you. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Mike, that was great. I think that, it's always touching to know that people are reaching out and making a difference in other people's lives. And so one of the things that the city is talking about, and David, maybe if you know a little bit about this, the King Day All Year, I'm not sure exactly what it's called. If anybody has any sort of notes about what that could be or where it stands, and that's would be a lovely thing to hear at this moment.
So I know that there was a recommendation as part of the Affordable Housing Task Force report that came out in the fall of 2019, I believe, which was really centered around making the MLK Service Day project more of a yearly kind of community value and priority. So not necessarily creating a formal kind of program that happens yearly, but creating that kind of sense of civic responsibility and neighbors helping neighbors. And I think this is a great kind of example of how normal people can help other normal people do the kind of projects in their homes that they need to get done. And I really thank Mike for providing that information.
It really is great how, you think about seniors and in particular, and how they start having a limited budget and end up with, if we get some of this benefit, how that lets them stay in their house longer oftentimes. And I think that's a great sort of a benefit of this. Did I see a chat pop in for a question from Michael Black?
Says, how could we make renovation incentivized for residents and do this large scale in Decatur and have MLK Junior Service Project show example projects?
Well, I have to say that's Michael and I and a few others are kind of trying to some extent work on. I want to crack this nut, and I think that the low income weatherization nationally has a long history as the Department of Energy weatherization effort. What I really want to see is, how can we spur everybody to do this? That if you're not low income, you still want to do this, and what does that look like? And we are kicking those ideas around. It's about getting people to see the value in it and pulling the trigger on it and making good things happen. And I don't know that that's necessarily a volunteer effort, or we have some companies that are trained in Decatur's weatherization effort, or how that all looks. Anybody else have thoughts on that? I know that we are kind of trying to knock heads on that a little, or knock ideas around on that.
Yeah. So I would say that, the clean energy plan is going to focus on a number of kind of policy possibilities and other things, but one of the key considerations will be some creative sources of dedicated funding to do projects similar to this. And I know that some of our neighboring and peer communities have already started kind of on that work. So the city, as it does its own energy efficiency projects and installs solar and starts saving money on its own energy bills, we could start dedicating some of that funding to expanding the MLK service project, doing more projects and more houses year round, et cetera. I also think that giving folks a better understanding of their energy bills and what they could potentially do in their own homes would give them kind of that extra push to start doing some of these smaller projects. So there's a few ideas. Robert, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, there's a variety of national sort of programs that sort of have lots of potential, and we'll be sort of analyzing those. We were talking to that about that today with one of our stakeholders, technical stakeholders, and sort of what are the things that are there. And it's really this is sort of what we call the demand side of the equation. Obviously, you want to supply as much clean energy as you can, but you also want to demand as little as you have to. And the demand side of projects is nationally there's some great examples, but usually they're in places with higher utility rates. One of the things we're going to be talking about in the roundtable tomorrow night, so we'll do a plug for that now, is we've got a tomorrow night on the 17th at 6 p.m. This is November 17th at 6 p.m. We're going to be having the Community and Equity Roundtable, and one of the topics we're going to be covering is some of the potential policies that are able to be implemented in communities. And so one of the difficult things, of course, though, is, like I said, when the rates are so low, the difference between low rates that the power company provides, but then high bills when you have houses with no insulation and lots of bypasses. And so the weatherization is a great sort of way to help out with lower income, but getting, like David said, maybe getting some information into the hands of the homeowners, and then having some sort of funding source to sort of help sort of kick people over and remove some of those initial barriers, but then ultimately having something that is people can tap into to reduce their bills and to sort of have the payments stretched out long enough that they can justify making some of those improvements and we're all talking about existing housing currently. So that's sort of it's a little bit of a tough nut to crack, though.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's exciting, and I think that Decatur has a great sort of mindset about it, and I do think there's a lot of people that would probably be interested in doing something if we kind of created an easy glide path for them to do that. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I know that we are trying to work on that. And I think I think there's a lot of potential. And what's great about weatherization is energy efficiency is something that offends very few people. There's no discussion to be had. We all know it's good. It's good on so many different levels and for so many different reasons. So
yeah. Well, the weatherization program in particular has got this great history and this great sort of knowledge base that can be easily trained up. And the problem is that we don't necessarily have enough demand and mastic monies. That's great, Mike. You have, for the marketplace, you got to have demand, you got to have supply, you got to have funding, you got to have, all other sorts of aspects of the market, knowledge. And so getting all those pieces in place is what it's going to take. And Decatur is a great example of a place that can make it happen.
Yeah. So, Mike, I have one other question for you. If somebody's watching this 202 and they think, hey, maybe I would be a potential project for a future MLK service day, or they know a friend or a neighbor or somebody in their place of worship, et cetera. How does one go about getting on that list? Who should they contact and where should they go for that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me just share my screen here because I had it on a slide, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that back up. Their website is mlkserviceproject.com. And when you go there, you can sign up, I think, in 3 main ways. You can sign up to donate, you can sign up to volunteer, and you can also sign up to be a recipient of improvements. And that's the website that you want to go to for that. I'll also add, David, because you made me think about it, if you are a somewhat handy DIY person and you want to improve, if you live in Decatur or anywhere and you want to improve your current home, southface.org has a lot of great information on our website. And also, if you're available, come and volunteer with us, because the MLK project has, I don't know, I think maybe 1,000 volunteers, and the folks doing weatherization, we're a subset. And we're very fortunate in that many current and former Southface employees come out and volunteer and help, and you can learn side by side with some of the actual real experts in the industry, folks that really know what they're doing. So a great plug to come out and volunteer, to not only do something good for someone else, but to learn some skills and put those on your own home.